My daughter stood up at the kitchen table, 2 days after we buried her father, and told 8 people that I had never balanced a checkbook on my own in my life. She said it with a smile. She said it like she was doing me a favor. That night, I went looking for the key with the red dot. My name is Lois Hadley. I am 67 years old, and I live in Muncie, Indiana. I was married to Harold for 44 years. He died of a stroke on a Tuesday in November, 3 months ago now, and I have not told this story to anyone outside of a lawyer's office until tonight. I should tell you what I did for a living because it matters more than you'd expect. I spent 34 years as a claims adjuster at Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance. I started in 1984, 24 years old, driving out to farms in Delaware County to assess hail damage and barn fires. Over time, I moved inside. By 2001, I was doing commercial property claims, and from 2009 until I retired in 2018, I reviewed disputed settlements. That job is one thing repeated until it becomes muscle. You read the policy, then you read it again, then you read the exclusion clause on page 11 that nobody reads, and that clause is almost always the whole story. You learn very quickly that a document says what it says, not what the agent told you on the phone, not what you assumed, not what seems fair. What the document says. I retired in 2018 and handed all of that over at the door. I planted tomatoes. I drove Harold to his store in the mornings. I made the coffee and answered his emails when he was in the back, and I never once applied the same eye to our own paperwork that I had applied to 34 years of other people's. Nobody does. You think you're home. Harold owned Hadley Hardware and Supply at 412 Commerce Street. He'd built it from a 2-room outfit in 1985 into a 2-story brick building that he bought outright in 2003. The ground floor was the store. The second floor he'd rented since 2013 to a dental practice run by a man named Dr. Weston, $2,600 a month, never late, quiet money. Harold liked quiet money. Our older daughter, Bridget, is 43. She and her husband Scott moved back to Muncie in 2021 after Scott's marketing firm restructured and let him go. Bridget is sharp. She makes lists. She sends calendar invites for birthday dinners, and she knows where every document in her own house lives, down to the warranty card on the dishwasher. When Harold's blood pressure started climbing in 2022, Bridget began coming by on Sundays. She sat in on appointments. She made a binder. I was grateful. I said so. I still mean it. Our younger daughter, Tamara, is 40. She lives in Columbus, Ohio, and works for a children's hospital as a social worker. She is the one who, when I call her with hard news, goes quiet for a moment before she says the thing that matters. Harold had a key ring he'd carried since the 80s, heavy with years of accumulated keys. His system, a dot of red nail polish on the ones that were important, the mailbox key, the breaker box key, and one key I had never seen him use, flat and brass, shorter than a house key. I asked about it once, maybe 2019. He said it was the safety deposit box at First Merchants Bank downtown. I said I didn't know we had one. He said we'd had it since 2008, and there was nothing to clean out, just important documents. And that was the end of that conversation. In October of this year, about 3 weeks before he died, Harold and I were sitting on the back porch in the cold because he liked the cold at the end. He was watching the neighbor's dog nose around the fence. He said, without looking at me, that the key with the red dot was at First Merchants downtown, box 214. He said, "Go alone, Lois, not with anyone else." After, I told him to stop being dramatic. He said he wasn't being dramatic, he was being organized. Then he said the one thing I have turned over every day since, "And don't tell Bridget you went." I almost laughed. I said, "Harold, what on earth is in there?" He watched the dog for a second. Then he said, "Insurance." He died on a Tuesday, November 4th, at 6:15 in the morning. The hospice nurse was in the kitchen with me when the breathing changed. The funeral was that Saturday, 41 degrees and gray, which is just November in Indiana. Bridget organized the service. She did a very good job. I want to say that plainly. The programs were printed, the flowers were right. She greeted every person who came through the door of the funeral home on Macedonia Avenue, and she knew most of their names. I was proud of her for most of that day. Scott is 45. He manages Bridget's calendar and picks up their kids from school. He has had 3 job titles since he moved back to Muncie, and none of them quite taken hold. He is not a bad man. He's a man who needs things to stay steady and has been working for 15 years to make sure they do. 2 days after the funeral, a Monday, Bridget called a family meeting at the house. 8 of us at my kitchen table. Harold's brother Howard and his wife drove in from Indianapolis. Tamara came up from Columbus the night before and slept in her old room. Bridget and Scott sat at the end of the table nearest the window, and Bridget had brought her binder. She walked us through the estate, the store, the building, the truck, the accounts. She explained she had already contacted Dwight Marsh at Marsh & Poole on Walnut Street, who had drawn Harold's will in 2016, and that she would be filing with the Delaware County Probate Court to be named personal representative. She said the phrase, personal representative, the way a person says a title they've already been given. Harold's will left me the household furnishings and personal effects. It left the commercial building at 412 Commerce to Bridget. Store inventory and equipment split between both daughters. There was some cash in a joint account that would cover a portion of my expenses for the year. I sat there and did arithmetic the way I always do. The building was assessed at $340,000. The rent from the dental office was $1,600 a month. My Social Security comes to $1,480. My Farm Bureau pension is $910. I had $41,000 in a savings account I'd been quietly building for 20 years. Then Bridget said the thing I want to be accurate about because I've replayed it enough times that I know I have it right. Howard had asked whether there was anything I needed help with, and Bridget said, gently, before I could answer, Mom's going to be fine. The hard part is she's never really managed the financial side on her own. She looked at me with the patient look. You've never even balanced a checkbook, Mom. But that's what we're here for. Howard looked at his hands. Tamara looked at me. I looked at the binder on the table in front of my daughter, and I said, That's kind of you, Bridget. I meant it as a thank you, and I meant it as a lid on a pot. After everyone left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I found Harold's keys on the hook by the back door, and I held that brass key with the red dot in my palm, and I thought about what he'd said. After, alone, not Bridget. I did not go to the bank that week. I went the following Thursday morning by myself and drove to First Merchants on Main Street and said I needed to access box 214. The woman at the desk, Ellen, mid-40s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, looked up the box, confirmed it was in Harold's name with me as joint access, and said she was sorry for my loss. She walked me to the back. The box was medium-sized, gray metal. Inside, a brown accordion folder with an elastic cord closure and one sealed white envelope with my name on it in Harold's handwriting. I did not open the envelope in the bank. I took everything to my car, turned on the heat, and opened the accordion folder on my lap. The first document was a promissory note, dated March 14, 2012, $287,000. Interest rate of 4% fixed. Monthly payments of $1,531.14 beginning April 1, 2012. Payable to Harold R. Hadley. Signed at the bottom by Bridget Ann Hadley Croft and Scott James Croft. I read it twice before I let myself look up. I knew that in 2012, Bridget and Scott had bought their first house outside Indianapolis. I knew Harold had helped with the down payment. I did not know the word down payment had been replaced with the phrase promissory note. I did not know there had been a closing table. I did not know there had been a signature. Clipped behind the promissory note was a smaller page. 4 lines of text, 2 signatures, a notary seal. Assignment of promissory note. Harold R. Hadley assigns all right, title, and interest in the above-described note to Lois M. Hadley. Signed by Harold. Dated September 22, 2020. Notarized by someone at a UPS store on McGalliard Road. I know that date because it was a Tuesday, and I remember Harold saying he was running errands after lunch and coming home smelling like the ink of a notary stamp. I didn't ask. It was Tuesday. Behind that were 2 more documents. One was a filing record from the Delaware County Recorder's Office. The promissory note had been recorded as an instrument affecting real property, the house where Bridget and Scott lived, in March 2012. The assignment to me had been recorded in September 2020. Both had purple ink filing stamps with book and page numbers in the upper corner. The second document was a spiral notebook, small, the kind that comes in a 3-pack at CVS, a payment ledger, Harold's handwriting, 3 columns in pencil, date, amount received, running balance. The payments came in regular from 2012 through 2019, $1,531.14 every month, first of the month, and even rows down the page. Then around 2019, the margin notes started. Late 8 days, late 12 days, in parentheses, check bounced, redeposited. Then July of 2022, empty. 2 words in the margin, no payment. And again in August. Every month, straight through October of this year, 14 entries in a row. The last entry is dated October 28th, 14 days before Harold died. The handwriting is smaller than the early pages and sits a little crooked on the line, the way handwriting does when a person cannot hold a pen quite level anymore. It says, Nope MT 14. He numbered them. He wanted whoever read it to count without having to count. I sat in that car for a long time. Then I opened the white envelope. 1 page, front and back, ballpoint pen, dated September 22, 2020, the same day as the assignment. He wrote, Lois, by the time you read this, I'll have explained the first part already. Or you'll have figured it out. You always figure things out. What I couldn't figure out was how to be the man who holds a note on his own daughter. So I built it, and I stepped back out of it. I need you to be the one holding this. Not because you're harder. Because you're steadier. And because if I'm still breathing when this goes sideways, and it already has, I'll forgive it before it clears my throat. He wrote that in March 2012, Bridget and Scott had come to him for help on a house they could not afford, and he said yes. He wrote that he'd asked an attorney friend to draw up a note because his own father had given money away and died with nothing, and Harold swore he would never do that to himself or to me. He wrote that he told Bridget the note was a formality. He wrote, I think she believed me. I think she stopped believing me by 2018 and just never said so. He wrote that in September 2020, 14 months after the payments first started slipping, he drove to the UPS store on McGalliard and had the assignment notarized and then drove to the recorder's office and filed it. He wrote, I did it on a Tuesday so you wouldn't ask. The last paragraph was 4 lines. I have them without looking now. He wrote, You have spent 34 years reading the fine print on other people's problems. I am sorry I asked you to stop reading at the front door. Everything I have is yours. Now the paper says so. I love you. Don't call Bridget first. I drove to the grocery store on the way home because I needed something to do with my hands. I bought butter and a rotisserie chicken and a bunch of tulips that were on sale, and I stood in the floral aisle for about 4 minutes, not looking at anything. That night I called Tamara. I read her the title off the top of each document, just the titles. Promissory note. Assignment of promissory note. She went quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, Mom, he signed the loan over to you in 2020. I said I understood that, but I didn't know what it meant in practice. She said, It means Bridget doesn't owe the estate. She owes you. She's owed you since 2020. Then she said, You need certified copies from the recorder's office, not the originals. Certified copies? What's in your folder proves you have paper. The recorder's records prove the paper is real. I wrote that down on a paper towel on the counter. Then she said, Do you want me to come up? I said, Not yet. I said it the way you say it when you already know what you're going to do next, and you need to do it alone first. The Delaware County Recorder's Office is at 100 West Main Street. Open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. I drove there the next Friday morning, and I told the woman at the front counter that I had never done this before. She said most people haven't. Her name tag said Pam. She walked me to a public terminal and showed me the grantor-grantee index. Grantor means the one giving. Grantee means the one receiving. Pick your years, type the last name, hit search. She put her finger on the screen, the way a person does when they've explained something 1,000 times and still mean it. Then she stepped back and let me type. Hadley, H, and there was 30 years of Harold on a screen I had never seen. The promissory note recorded March 2012, the assignment recorded September 2020. Grantor, Harold R. Hadley. Grantee, Lois M. Hadley. I had been in a public record for 4 years and 3 months and did not know it. Pam printed what I needed. I laid the printouts beside the originals from the accordion folder and went across them line by line the way I used to cross-reference a loss report against a policy. Every number matched, every date matched. The purple filing stamps. Same ink, same crooked angle on the page. Certified copies came to $47. She gave me a receipt. I want to be clear about something, because it is the whole point of this story. Not one document in that folder was hidden. Not one page of it. The assignment had been sitting in an open record on West Main Street since September of 2020. Bridget's name was in that index as a grantor from 2012. Anyone in my family could have walked into that building on any weekday for 4 years, spent $47, and known everything I now knew. Nobody ever went. The attorney I found was named Ree, in an office above a title company on Tillotson Avenue. 48 years old, probate work for 22 years, told me her hourly rate before she offered me a seat. I put the accordion folder on her desk without saying anything. She read for 18 minutes. Then she said, "Mrs. Hadley, do you understand what your daughter's position requires?" I said I didn't follow. She said, "It requires this note to still be inside your husband's estate at the time of his death. If she inherits the note, the debt disappears. The debtor and the creditor become the same party. Lawyers call it merger. It's a real doctrine." She tapped the assignment. But this note left Harold's estate on September 22, 2020. There's nothing to merge. Your daughter doesn't owe your husband's estate. She owes you. She asked whether Harold had ever explained why he waited. I said there was a letter and I'd read all of it. She nodded once and moved on. She gave me the timeline flat, in order. Notice of default, 30-day cure period, then filings. She explained that the probate inventory Bridget had already filed with the court listed the building, the store inventory, a savings bond, and the joint checking account. It did not list $287,000 in unpaid principal owed by Bridget and Scott to their mother. She had left herself off her own mother's ledger. Ree also walked me through the surviving spouse rights under Indiana Code, the family allowance, the spousal allowance, the elective share. She explained the elective share twice, then said, "The note counts against you in the augmented estate calculation. Financially, the election may be worth very little, but filing it freezes distribution of that building while your other claims are pending." I asked how long the whole process would take. She said roughly 3 months, start to finish. I said Harold had maintained that building and its tenants for 20 years. I could wait 3 months. The notice of default went out January 8th, certified mail, return receipt requested. Bridget signed for it on a Thursday. The green card came back with her signature. The same signature I watched her practice at age 12 on the back of a permission slip for a field trip. My phone rang at 9 o'clock that Saturday evening and went to voicemail. I played it the next morning with coffee. Bridget's voice was controlled in the particular way voices get when a person is furious and knows the recording may be listened to later. She said, "I don't know who put you up to this, but Dad would never have wanted you going after your own family. And then, he forgave that debt. Everyone who knew him knows he forgave it." Scott called the day after. His message was 4 minutes long. He used the phrase financial elder abuse twice. I wrote both phrases down because I wanted to be fair to them when I talked about them later. Here is what neither of them did in 11 days with a lawyer on retainer. Neither one went to the recorder's office on West Main Street. The index was open. The computer terminal was available to any member of the public on any weekday between 8 and 4. $47 and one morning. Not one of them ever went. The hearing was February 19th at the Delaware County Courthouse. The probate courtroom is on the 2nd floor. 10 wooden benches, a window that looks into the parking structure, a wall clock that runs about 4 minutes fast. I wore a navy cardigan and my mother's watch, the one with the small face and the brown leather band. Bridget sat at the respondent's table with her attorney, a man named Hensley, who spoke in the measured tone of someone being paid to be measured. Scott sat in the first row behind her. He had his phone out, and then he put it away. Tamara sat beside me. She had driven up the night before, and we'd eaten pasta at the kitchen table, and she had not once asked me if I was sure. Hensley argued that the promissory note had always represented a family transaction, that Harold had communicated on multiple verbal occasions his intent to forgive the debt, and that the assignment itself had been made without my knowledge or participation. He said I was 67 years old, had no background in commercial lending, and had been, and I am quoting, advised into an adversarial posture by counsel. I have heard that construction before. In 22 years of claims work, I heard it used exactly that way, to suggest that a woman of a certain age could not have arrived at a position on her own. The judge was a woman. She let Hensley finish. Then she asked him one question. Was the forgiveness documented anywhere in writing? Hensley said it was verbal, consistent over many years, and understood by all parties involved. She looked at her notes. Then she looked past him at my daughter and asked Bridget directly whether she and her husband had made any payment on the note in the past 14 months. Bridget glanced at Hensley before she answered. Then she said, "Your Honor, our understanding was always that this was a family loan. My father never expected repayment. My mother inherited nothing real from that folder. She inherited a formality." She half-turned when she said it, the way you turn when you want the room to hear. Ree stood up. She had 4 sheets of paper and nothing else. Exhibit A, promissory note, March 14, 2012. Principal $287,000. Signed by Bridget Ann Hadley Croft and Scott James Croft. Exhibit B, assignment of promissory note, September 22, 2020. Signed by Harold R. Hadley, grantee. Lois M. Hadley, notarized. Exhibit C, certified copy from the Delaware County Recorder's Office. Recorded in the public record for 4 years, 3 months, and 28 days. She set the papers down. Then she said, "This note left Harold Hadley's estate more than 4 years before he died. There is nothing to merge. Mrs. Hadley's daughter does not owe a ghost. She owes her mother." The judge looked at Hensley. Did anyone run a search on the grantor-grantee index at the recorder's office? Hensley looked down at the table for about 2 seconds. He said they had proceeded on information provided by their client. Bridget came out of her chair when Ree read the final 3 lines of the ledger aloud. "No payment! No payment! No payment! 14. In a flat voice into that courtroom, she said, "That is my father's handwriting. He was sick. That's a sick man's notes, not a contract." Hensley had a hand on her forearm. The judge said her name once firmly. She sat. I did not turn around. I was afraid that if I looked at her face, I would get up and go to her. So I looked at the accordion folder on the table in front of Ree instead, and I kept looking at it until the room settled. Then the judge asked if I wished to speak. I stood from where I was. I said, "I spent 34 years reading insurance policies so that claims were paid correctly. I applied none of that to my own household, and I own my part in that," I said. "I am not asking this court to take anything from my daughter. I am asking that what she signed be honored," I said. "I paid for my husband's funeral on January 3rd, $11,240 from my own account. I have not been reimbursed $1 of it. I would like that back." And then I said the thing Ree had argued with me about in the car on the way over. I am withdrawing the elective share petition. The note counted against me in the calculation, and the election was worth very little in real dollars, and pushing it would have delayed Tamara's portion of the estate by months for no gain. I said, "I don't want more than I'm owed. I want exactly what I'm owed, not $1 more." The judge allowed the surviving spouse allowance, the homestead exemption, and the funeral claim. She reviewed the inventory Bridget had filed and ordered a corrected version within 30 days. She removed Bridget as personal representative and appointed a neutral administrator out of Indianapolis. We came out into the hallway at 11 in the morning. Bridget walked ahead of Scott and pushed through the stairwell door without looking back. Scott stopped in front of me for a moment. He looked like he had something to say and then decided he didn't. He followed her out. Tamara put her arm through mine, and we walked down to the lobby together. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 15 minutes before I started it. I was not triumphant. I was tired in the way that comes from a thing being finished. I drove to a diner on Madison Street and ordered coffee and scrambled eggs and ate alone at the counter, which I have not done since Harold and I were first married and living in an apartment with one folding table and the wrong number of chairs. Here is what happened after, in order, because order is the point. February 28th. The neutral administrator filed a corrected inventory. The promissory note appeared on it as an outstanding liability, offset against Bridget's distribution accordingly. March 14th. I received the funeral reimbursement, $11,240, from the estate account, 100 days after I paid it out of my own savings. March 20th. The surviving spouse allowance was released, $25,000 under Indiana Code, plus the homestead exemption. April 9th, a Thursday. Bridget and Scott cured the default. They refinanced a vehicle to cover the arrears, 14 months at $1,531.14, plus attorney's fees and late charges. The wire came through at 2:17 in the afternoon. Ree called me. I was in the backyard pulling up dead tomato cages from last fall. I reinstated the note. New terms. Automatic bank draft on the 1st of the month. No exceptions. One payment more than 10 days late and the full remaining balance accelerates with no conversation about it. They signed in Ree's office on a Tuesday. Bridget asked if she could have a copy for her records. I said, that's how this is supposed to work. The building at 412 Commerce passed to Bridget in May, once all allowances and claims were satisfied, and the final number was about $58,000 less than she and Scott had been expecting. Dr. Weston's dental practice is still on the second floor. He renewed his lease in March. I bought a small house on the east side of Muncie. 2 bedrooms, a covered porch, a kitchen window that faces the backyard. The deed says Lois M. Hadley. Just that, on its own line. I have never had a deed with only my name on it. It looks strange and correct at the same time. The accordion folder sits on the bookshelf in the front room where I can see it from the couch. I added one thing. 2 words on a strip of masking tape on the front cover in my own handwriting. Still good. Harold's spiral notebook is inside. I am not going to throw it away. Tamara came up in April. I took her to the recorder's office on West Main. I showed her the terminal. Grantor means the one giving. Grantee means the one receiving. Pick your years, type the name, hit search. 9 minutes to find her father in the public record. 40 years of him, in a room with fluorescent lights and a folding chair with a loose leg. She cried a little. I gave her time. Then I told her the only thing I know, which I have turned over every day since November. I did not win because I was smarter than my daughter. I did not win because I had an attorney. I won because I was the only person in my family willing to spend one Friday morning and $47 reading a document that had been sitting in an open record on West Main Street for 4 years and 3 months. One morning and $47. Not one person in my family ever went. Harold signed that assignment on a Tuesday and drove home and told me he'd been running errands. He kept his voice level and his handwriting level, and he asked me at supper what I wanted to do over the weekend. He was not hiding it from me. He was keeping me from unraveling it before I was supposed to. I understand the difference now. Read the paper with your name on it. Read it before someone else tells you what it says. Read it before you need to. That's all I have. 1 accordion folder, 1 Tuesday errand, and a brass key with a red dot.